Welcome to this episode of Eureka, and we are going to have a really engaging and a very interesting conversation with Professor N Raghuram, who is the Dean and also the Professor at the School of Biotechnology in Guru Gobind Singh, Indraprastha University in Delhi. Before we continue this conversation, let's take a quick look at his brief profile.
Nitrogen is a significant building block of life. It is present in almost 80% of our atmosphere, but in that form, it's unusable. Humans and most other species on Earth need nitrogen in a fixed reactive form. Today, humans create twice as much reactive nitrogen as nature. In contrast, human activity contributes 5 to 10% of CO2 emissions. Much of this reactive nitrogen has accumulated in the environment, where it negatively impacts health of human beings and ecosystem. Professor N Raghuram has been working with the Indian Nitrogen Group to enhance nitrogen use efficacy and reduce air pollution. Professor N Raghuram is Dean at School of Biotechnology, GGS, Indraprastha University in Dwarka. He obtained his MSc ED in Life Sciences from NCERT, Utkal University in 1984. Professor N Raghuram did his MPhil from the Pune University in 1987 and obtained his PhD in Life Sciences from Jawaharlal Nehru University in 1994. As co-founder of the Indian Nitrogen Group in 2006, he facilitated interdisciplinary international consultations on research and policy aspects of reactive nitrogen and other nutrients in agriculture, industry and environment, and co-led the Indian Nitrogen Assessment. As a modern biologist, Professor Raghuram's research interests are primarily in functional biology and biotechnology of nitrogen metabolism in higher plants and cyanobacteria. His broader interests are in health, education, science dissemination and policy. Professor Raghuram has been honoured with many awards and recognitions. His publications include many articles in referred journals and books. He received over 1150 citations from over 50 countries.
Thank you. It's a very wonderful opportunity, and in this episode, I want to talk to you about your recent report on nitrogen, which is making waves. It's making up a lot of people to sit up, and I believe the amount of nitrogen that we actually apply in our field and getting wasted is close to about 50,000 crores.
Yeah.
So even if we can save about 10% of it, all the research budgets would be covered.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start with the simple question that many people have. You know, I mean, if you look at the atmosphere, close to about 78% is nitrogen, you know, 75-78% is nitrogen, and plants do need nitrogen.
Yes.
Why do we need to worry about it? If after all, there in the air, plant can take, right?
You are right. Nitrogen is the most predominant gas in the atmospheric, Earth's atmosphere at least, but that gas is N triple bond N, which is relatively chemically inert and cannot be easily utilized in biological systems. In fact, just to break that one bond, the Haber-Bosch process that was discovered used to use for some 500 degrees centigrade and 500 atmospheres of pressure and conditions which lead to accidents like Bhopal gas disaster. Those were the kind of conditions in which fertilizers were manufactured by converting the nitrogen gas into ammonia and fertilizer. In agriculture, almost all the crop production depends on the availability of various nutrients for the plants to grow, and they have to come from the soil. And the nitrogen compounds, if you are repeatedly including phosphorus and potassium used in NPK fertilizers, all these major nutrients, if you are repeatedly cropping in an area, they will get depleted at some point. So conventionally, people were either growing intercropping with pulses which were able to fix atmospheric nitrogen through symbiotic bacteria in their roots.
Okay.
Or soil bacteria used to convert that nitrogen gas into usable forms like nitrate, ammonium and so on.
So, it's like for example, if I have iron deficiency, it's not like I eat iron, but I eat iron in a particular form that my body can actually take.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's like that, right? I mean, even if there is nitrogen all around, the plants cannot directly take it, they need it in a particular. But you said that this leguminous plant can actually convert the atmospheric nitrogen into usable nitrogen, I mean plant usable nitrogen. Then how do they do it? I mean,
yeah. Even plants by themselves, including leguminous plants, cannot directly take atmospheric nitrogen gas and assimilate it. Actually, only microbes can do that.
okay.
In the biological world, microorganisms have the capacity to, using an enzyme called nitrogenase, they can convert nitrogen gas into various reactive compounds, include ammonium and nitrate and so on, from where they can be available for other organisms. This process that naturally occurs in the soil is called nitrification.
Okay.
So, these bacteria are called nitrifying bacteria. So, there is a microbial procedure of converting nitrogen compounds, unusable nitrogen compounds or nitrogen gas into usable nitrogen compounds, which then become available either as manure or as just soil, dissolved soil things, or later when you compost and do other things. Some of these microorganisms are also held as symbiotic guests in the roots in places called nodules in legumes. Only legumes among all the higher plants have the capacity to fix nitrogen, not by themselves, by using the bacteria harbored in their roots. So, this is called symbiotic nitrogen fixation, and farmers know that legumes and cereals, when they are alternatively grown, the crop does well.
Okay.
Traditionally they know it.
Okay. By observation.
By observation they know it. But scientifically we know that this is mainly because all the bacteria in the legume roots, nodules, they convert available inorganic nutrients into usable forms. Whatever the plant can take, they take. There is still more that is left behind in the roots or in the soil, and that is carried over to the next crop.
But here I have a question.
Yeah.
I mean, even before, let's say we did agriculture, plants were growing. So, which means those plants also needed nitrogen.
Yes.
Okay. So, instead of growing a particular plant, you clear it off and then you are growing a plant that we need, I mean, let's say rice or wheat or something like that.
Right.
So, why there is a problem, why we have to look for artificial fertilizers? I mean, after all, it's a natural process. Even otherwise, let's say in a forest, trees grow, plants grow, you don't fertilize there. So, why do we need in agriculture artificial input?
In an unmanaged ecosystem like a forest, for example, there is a natural cycling of nutrients. There is litter generated when leaves fall, organisms die, they decompose. All those nutrients are recycled by bacteria and they go back into plants. So, a complete food chain is formed in every ecosystem. In agroecosystem, these are essentially managed ecosystems, man-made ecosystems. So, there is a whole system around agriculture, but we call it agroecosystem. It is an artificial, man-made ecosystem. If you are repeatedly cropping in the same land, the plants are mining away all the nutrients from the soil. And if you are taking away the entire crop, then all the nutrients are going away with the crop.
Oh, okay. So, I take the crop and maybe take it to the city. I mean, it's no longer there in the field, right?
Unlike in the forest where everything is recycled then and there, as long as there is something going out, nothing coming in, then there is a problem.
Take a very short break here. I mean, we'll take a very short break here. After the break, we are going to discuss our current method of intensive agriculture is having a problem. The precision agriculture is a solution, but that's not feasible in India in a very large scale, India like country in a very large scale immediately. So, what do we do? This is what we are going to discuss after the break. Keep watching Eureka. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very wonderful and a very engaging conversation with Professor N Raghuram, who is the Dean and Professor at the School of Biotechnology in Guru Gobind Singh, Indraprastha University in Delhi. Before the break, we talked about the current problem. The problem is that what we do today is really a problem. It's actually taking too much of fertilizers and not yielding so much of result. But the alternative, that if you want to move to precision agriculture, where you need to put small tubes and various ways in which you give little water almost throughout the day, or different parts of the day, then you need lot of investment in the farm, which is not feasible for food grade production and things of that kind. So what do we do? What exactly is the problem first, and what do we do?
Okay, there are two aspects to it. One is that the way you manage your crop, right, which means you can add a fertilizer that dissolves slowly, like a slow release tablet.
Okay. So instead of putting a fertilizer which will immediately dissolve and go into the soil, you put something which will stay for longer time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So such formulations have been developed. They are little more expensive than the conventional fertilizer, and how to make the newer, more efficient formulations more affordable to the farmer is a policy arena where the government has been looking at it. For example, neem coated urea has been brought in as a major solution in the recent past, because the neem oil contains some compounds that inhibit urease enzyme. Urease enzyme is the enzyme used by soil bacteria to convert urea into ammonia, and then other bacteria convert ammonia into nitrate. Plants usually pick up either nitrate or ammonia as their preferred source of nitrogen. They can also pick up some urea, but largely they pick up nitrate. That is the most preferred source. So if you give neem coated urea, sometimes there are some ways where they make, instead of powder, they make a big pellet or a ball. You can place it right at the rooting bottom of the plant, so that it gradually trickles and dissolves, or you can broadcast a powder, then it can be lost. So there are ways of particle size, etc., being looked at, but neem coating by itself can reduce the speed of conversion of urea into other forms, and as it is slowed down, you may be able to apply like once in 2 weeks or so, and it will stay for a week or more.
Now let me ask you this question. So which means that today, when a farmer is actually putting urea in his farm or in her farm, a huge amount of urea is actually not being used for production, right?
Absolutely.
So what's the kind of estimate? What percentage you think is?
From the Indian Nitrogen Group, we have estimated, well, based on the fertilizer consumption data and the crop use efficiency data that is available to us from various government institutions, approximately 30% fertilizer use efficiency is known, accepted worldwide. So 70% of the fertilizer that you add to the crop is not harvested as crop. It is somewhere in the field, it is lost essentially in the field. Some of it may carry over to the next crop, but a lot of it is just lost.
At least 50% is actually lost.
Yeah. So that when you monetize the cost of it, the amount of money spent in making that fertilizer, it works out to more than 50,000 crores per annum. And that's a huge amount of public investment that's lost in terms of applied but unutilized wasted fertilizer. It's a lot more than all R&D expenditure in all the ministries across government.
That's a huge thing. See, before we were talking about one way of tackling this issue is if you can, make the fertilizer slow release. That's one track. Is there another track which we can follow for addressing this problem?
So, as I said, there are agronomic or crop management practices that people can follow. Either you add small amounts every day, or you add slow release fertilizer, or you make big pellets and particles. So these are all management options, but it's ultimately you just make that much water available to the horse. The horse has to be able to drink it. So the plant has its own limited ability to use whatever nitrogen is made available to it. By all the other methods, what you are doing is you are optimizing the amount of nitrogen available around the rooting zone of the plant. But still the plant's limited ability has to be tackled biologically. So that is where people like us, the biotechnology and the biological science community people, even from agricultural biotechnology people are involved. They are looking at how to make the plant take more nitrogen that is made available to it, how to retain whatever it takes. You also want to optimize all the fertilizer you put to produce what you want to produce. For example, you give lot of fertilizer, the plant grows very big, rice produces lot of leaf, but you do not want leaf from rice.
You want rice actually.
Whereas if it is a leafy vegetable, you want the leaf. If it is a flower, you want a flower or a fruit. Okay. So, what output you want from each crop for the input you give, same input of nitrogen varies from crop to crop. Now, this is an inherent biological property of that crop. Each plant has its own way of diverting the nutrient to produce what it produces.
So, now coming to the question of your nitrogen report, which is a very huge effort that you and your colleagues have taken. What are its major features? What does it tell us?
To connect with what I was saying before, we work on rice. So, in rice itself, as I was saying, in India, again almost 60% of all urea used as a nitrogen fertilizer in Indian agriculture goes into cereal grain production.
Okay.
So, rice and wheat, essentially rice and wheat. So, nearly 2/3 of all our fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer is spent on rice and wheat. The rest is spent on vegetables and cash crops and others and fruits and so on, where because of higher margins, farmers are able to bring better technologies to bring better efficiencies. It is in food grain production
we have the problem,
where we have problem on both counts. We have the problem of not being able to reduce use of nitrogen because food production is essential for us. For food security, we cannot compromise, and we also have a low nitrogen use efficiency because of the existing system.
Okay.
We need to identify the phenotype, something that visually distinguishes a nitrogen efficient rice or any other crop from the visual appearance of an inefficient crop. Okay. So, the important thing is to get a scientific grip on the phenotype and genotype for a property called nitrogen use efficiency,
okay,
a biological property, so that you can make the horse drink more water and grow better, as they would say. And if we are able to do that, and if we are increasing nitrogen use efficiency even by 10%, we essentially mean a saving of 5,000 crores, and 2/3 of that saving is to come from grains, not from any other crops.
Okay.
Yet there is a wider question. When the world today is talking about reactive nitrogen becoming a pollutant, even though it is a nutrient in our food production system, the same reactive nitrogen compound, whether it is urea or uric acid or ammonia or nitrate, can become a pollutant if it is in a drinking water source.
Yeah.
Or a eutrophication problem if it is in a pond or river or sea. So, and it can be a health hazard if it is in groundwater or in the air. So, there is a tendency which we have noticed over the last decade to measure the reactive nitrogen load in the environment and blame it all on fertilizer.
Okay. This is a very important issue which we need to discuss. Keep watching Eureka. We will come back after a very short break. Welcome back to Eureka, and we are having a very interesting and a very enlightening discussion with Professor N Raghuram. Some people say that if you look at the rain, the nitrogen content in it is almost 9 times more than what it was in pre-industrial level. So, which means we have put reactive nitrogen into this environment more than what it was. Something close to, like, say, it's a kind of a same problem, like, say, for example, the global warming, where we have put more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Is it all from agriculture? Agriculture is to be blamed?
Yeah, this was a question that we have been looking at as a part of the larger consortium of nitrogen scientists in the country for about a decade. We formed the Indian Nitrogen Group in 2006, and we brought together scientists who work on all aspects of the nitrogen cycle to understand whether there is a observed problem of how much nitrogen, reactive nitrogen exists in the Indian environment, either in NOx which is mostly coming through vehicle exhaust, or nitrous oxide which is coming through either fertilizer or sewage or other sources, and ammonia which is also coming from livestock and other sources, industrial sources. If we took all of them together, how much we find in the air, as you said, even now it is nitrogen compounds are raining. We find nitrogen compounds in the rain, and where are they coming from? They are not coming from outer space, they are going from land and coming back as rain at certain times of the year. That means we are producing that much reactive nitrogen, which is actually coming back to fertilize some of our lands, and there are a few isolated evidences to show that even in some forest areas which are not fertilized, a better growth due to the higher nitrogen content of rain is happening in certain pockets. So, we know that this is happening, and we also know that in certain surface water bodies, the increase in the nutrients including nitrogen, also phosphorus and others, is leading to the growth of algae and water bodies becoming very green and later brown and eventually red, and then the fish dying and all. And groundwater levels of nitrate in many parts of the country, we have compiled the data across, have already reached twice the safe drinking water levels prescribed by WHO. So, we realized to our surprise that the international community tends to easily blame agriculture for everything because the fertilizer data is easily available, fertilizer industry is well organized, so the data becomes readily accessible. But what is not organized is not that it does not exist, and what does not exist should not be, what is not available should not be assumed to be not a problem. So, and we as a country cannot stop our agriculture. For foreseeable future, our fertilizer management system is not going to change drastically. But on the other hand, if you look at non-agricultural sources, and that is the biggest surprise for us, sewage becomes the second largest contributor and the fastest growing contributor to reactive nitrogen load and nitrous oxide load. Imagine your daily household sewage, your daily municipal sewage, all your mounds of garbage in Bhalswa and all these places across the country, both solid waste as well as liquid waste coming out of homes, spewing out greenhouse gas like nitrous oxide at the rate of 12%, 14%, 15% compound growth rate per annum. Fertilizer growth rate is 2%. So, you mean to say
that in near future, the domestic and other kinds of sewage might be the major problem?
Absolutely.
Will become a big issue?
This is where national environmental initiatives like Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or other environment initiatives, rural toilets, and all these schemes, actually they not only have a simple environmental component to it, they also have major other co-benefits which are not currently recognized, articulated and talked about both in domestic dialogue and in international dialogue. The amount of ammonia, urea, nitrogen that is lost through domestic sewage, if that can be recycled back into crops, you can cut down the fertilizer by as much as 40%.
So, this comes to the main question, because we are also kind of lacking information time. The question is that we know the problem now, the sewage is a major issue, but we need agriculture to continue. So, what do you think are let us say pointers to solutions?
So, sewage is the second largest growing, then traffic, that is petroleum burning either for diesel vehicles produce more NOx than petrol vehicles, and the tremendous growth of diesel vehicles both in personal and industrial transport, commercial transport has produced lot of NOx. So, nitrous oxide is mostly coming from agriculture, sewage and other things, but NOx is mostly coming from coal burning, residue burning and fuel burning, and they are all growing much faster than agricultural growth. So, that is what I am saying. If you cannot stop agriculture, but you can possibly rationalize, regulate and intervene to bring down the emissions from these areas. There is a nutrient saving component of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. So, there could be a synergy between Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and nutrient use efficiency. There could be a synergy between Ganga, Yamuna Abhiyan, Namami Ganga, etc. and nutrient use efficiency. There could be a synergy between rural toilet scheme and nutrient use efficiency. So, essentially you have to close the cycle. What is the required nutrient which is manufactured industrially by spending lots of money, tens of thousands of crores, is available free of cost
as a domestic waste.
As a pollutant elsewhere.
So you need to find a way of converting into a manure for farms.
Exactly. And technologies are available across the world, and countries in Denmark and Netherlands and other countries have used it. They need to be optimized to our reality, but it is possible to do that. Even in Africa, some places have tried these things, and it is possible. Lastly, I would say that we are lucky that India is able to conduct its own complete quantitative assessment of the nitrogen cycle without depending on any foreign support, probably without even depending on any government project for that purpose. By just spending our extra time as scientists from across the country, we were able to bring out this document of 500 pages, 60 scientists, which is now eagerly waited all over the world. It's already published electronically. Because of the size of this country, because of the scale of economic activity, whether agriculture or industry or air traffic or whatever, changes of nitrogenous contribution to the environment or savings of that contribution, mitigation, can have global impacts. So we are not only addressing domestic issues,
but it's actually a world.
No, the world is watching Indian trends of greenhouse gas emissions because they can affect world averages.
Okay.
But the best part is we have the capacity to understand these numbers now, and when the government needs to make these negotiations in international platforms, whether it is for sustainable development goals, INDC commitments, or internationalization of the domestic environment initiatives, as I said, Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or whatever, we are in a position to provide the numbers that the government needs to meet all these international obligations. And this is an experience that we ourselves realized. There is so much soft power available in India and Indian soft power abroad in our own field and in all other areas of science, technology, environment, economics and so on. If our government, the policymakers domestically as well as our negotiators internationally, if they find a way of using this available soft power, science can increasingly contribute to our negotiating capacity for environmental purposes, even for strategic purposes. We are the guardian of the South Asian seas, and only we have the capacity to understand, measure and defend. And when the international nitrogen management system is in place, for which a UN environment program is already on, we are already a partner.
Yeah, okay.
So this demonstrates the Indian soft power, which I believe the government can also use very effectively, both for domestic as well as for its international ambitions, and especially at a time when the world is looking at India for what we can contribute to the world, much beyond what we can contribute to ourselves.
That's a very interesting and important point. We need to focus on this study that they have conducted along with 60 scientists is a huge eye-opener. We should be looking at it, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity and a very, very lucid and very interesting explanation that we had here in this conversation. Keep watching Eureka. We'll come back with another interesting conversation next week, same time. Keep watching Eureka.